Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, where we provide world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. I'm Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, and it's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here today for a very special episode of a show called Energy. We are going to be talking about grief, which is very timely. As many of you know, my mother has passed away recently. I think it was about 6 weeks ago, and it's a different type of experience, one that's very different than when my father passed away. So with us is an expert in this field, Kalimba Culverwell, and she's going to join us right now. Kalimba, come out. Hello.
Hi, Dr. Jacalyn. Thank you for having me on. This is a real honor and a privilege. It's lovely to connect with you on here.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure to have you here. You are a creator. You are a creator of a podcast that is forthcoming, and it's going to be something that hopefully you'll come back and speak with us on as well later. You're the creator of Timeline Travelers podcast. What can people expect to learn from this podcast?
Well, really, it's going to be a discussion around spirituality and timeline shifts, particularly as we move into more 5D consciousness, or this new 5D world that people may have heard others talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. We have some team members here who are talking about 5D quite often. We even have a course here in our education platform about the transition, how to move from a 3D world to a 5D world. So what is it that got you interested in this subject?
Well, I think it's just been a range of spiritual awakenings that I've had over the last throughout my life, really. And this being an energy show, I wanted to talk about the sort of timeline shift that happens when you and the energy that transmutes when you go through an experience like grief, because we're discussing your grief and obviously my experience of it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and something that occurred to me, I just was sharing with a family member recently, is how many people actually knew my mother. So they were friends with my mother, or they're friends with me. My parents had them for dinner, or we brought them on vacation, and they haven't reached out. It's interesting also because I posted something on Facebook about my mother's passing. She was my best friend, and I was her caregiver for the last 3+ years. And people who knew my mother, who actually were in this house or sat at the kitchen table, wrote, "Sorry for your loss." And I didn't have any judgment. I don't have any judgment, but it's been a real awakening for me that was the energy that they were putting out about her being gone.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of that sentiment that we never know what our legacy is, because we don't know the lives we've touched, and we don't know how we've touched them. And I think, talking about loss and grief definitely is a loss of sorts, but it's something that I'm convinced that it's only us here in physical matter that really experience it. I think death doesn't actually happen to the person who's passed over. It's the people that they leave behind. And so to anyone going through that, just really want to kind of set the intention for this conversation that and send my love out to them as well, but set the intention that this becomes a healing space, and hopefully that some of the things we talk about, Jacalyn, help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I also just wanted to mention, we do have a message here.
Oh, great. Energy is my favorite subject.
Thanks, Marianne. Thanks for being with us today. We appreciate you.
Well, that's absolutely true. Look, energy is mine as well.
And what's interesting about the energy, how it does shift, even in the course of a day. I would say in the grieving process, I know for myself, my energy is kind of all over the place. Sometimes I have to force myself to do something, or to look at a different perspective. What are your thoughts about how our energy fields change just in 24 hours?
I mean, I think our energy can change, not necessarily, at any given time. I think with something like grief, half of the job is at some point when you're ready, learning to transmute that energy, because that energy might be sorrow, and pain, and things that are actually blocking your heart chakra or your energetic body, so to speak. But I think also people passing over is essentially a change in state of their energy, right? They move from something that's quite earthly and dense into something that's more like light or like air. And going through the process, surrendering to that process, learning to release anything. And listen, grief might not just be a person you've lost. It can be a place, it can be a job, it can be an opportunity. But so learning to deal with that energy is part of the process, I would say.
Absolutely. We actually had a show here with Doug Lawrence, who's a grief mentor, where we spent a lot of time talking about grief. He lost his wife, and people will say, "Oh, you should be over it by now," or else, as I just mentioned earlier, people don't say anything, or they just literally hide from you.
Yeah.
They think you don't realize it. They think you don't know that's what's going on. I know, since we are talking about my loss of my mother, that because I was her primary caregiver for 3+ years, she had dementia. I was watching the process of her losing her mind. And then she was diagnosed out of nowhere with cancer. And then she was dead just over a month later. But I actually watched her die. And it was not a pretty process. It was actually horrible. And so there's so many layers to it. And I think that that's part of what people also have to go through, is maybe the person was sick and you're the caregiver. And so that's one process. Then they passed away. And I know for me, I have a lot of time now that I didn't have before, because I was spending with my mother, but now I'm actually in her house, which she's not here. So there's so many different parts to it. And I know today we're providing education and awareness to help other people. So what are some of the tips that you can share with people about what to do to go through that grieving process? Because many times people will just fall into their work or into something else and not even allow the process to start.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I'd just like to say sorry, because dementia is one of those things where I think you lose the person twice. And so it is a particularly difficult process. There will be people out there like me. My experience of bereavement was actually quite traumatic. I had my fiance pass away in a drink driving accident. I had a cousin commit suicide jumping off a very, very high bridge in the UK. So yeah, there's lots of different types of grief. And in terms of coping strategies, I think the best thing you can do is be present, and really show yourself a hell of a lot of tenderness and kindness as you go through everything. There's no time limit. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And I think really, if you meditate, if you breathe, I think also if you accept, and that was one of the biggest lessons for me, was just accepting that this was the reality that I was experiencing, and I had a choice about whether I would remain curious about what spirit was trying to tell me through that process, and also if I would allow myself to completely go to bits, because that's a beautiful thing as well. There's a lot that we tell ourselves we have to be, but there's a lot about grief that strips you of all of that stuff and strips you of an aspect of your identity. And that's a really great opportunity. I would say run with it. In terms of other practical strategies, meditation, being around animals and pets, getting out into nature, if you're waking up in the middle of the night, drinking lots of water and affirming that you're keeping your heart open and you're releasing things. All of those sort of strategies really help. And also, I think if you start becoming more and more aware of the way that spirit is talking to you, that can be really a trip. You might start hearing songs, you might start seeing people approach you or animals approach you that have some sort of, there'd be a dog with the name or something that resonates for you or reminds you of the person. And that really is a communication. So being open to those communications.
Excellent tips. Thank you. And I'd also like to share, I think during the process, if you have a loved one and they are dying, as opposed to they just didn't wake up or an accident happened, but it's a slow, painful process. Sometimes it's a very fast process, but you as the caregiver or the loved one, you're putting so much energy out to help them or to guide them or to make medical decisions or financial decisions. And then that energy is literally sucked out of you and you have to replace it. So I love what you just shared about kindness and self-care and doing all the things for yourself that you might not have been able to do during the process. And when you're grieving, you still need to take care of yourself, because if you don't, your health can be affected mentally and physically. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree with you completely. Really, that's what I was saying by there's no right or wrong way to go through it. Take the time that it needs you to take. Breathe through things. Hold on. That's a really important bit of advice I'd like to give people, because it does get better. It does get easier. And if you really use it as an opportunity to allow it to illuminate stuff internally, you can't help. And especially if you really sort of focus on the love that is around you at that time, because there will be enormous love and support around you, even when you think it isn't. It really is there. And if you allow yourself to really lean back into that, you will find that your energy starts coming back. But I think sleep is a really great practical way to manage that energy loss while you sort of recuperate. Sleep is invaluable, and you really shouldn't, whenever you feel the need for it, don't judge yourself. Don't, allow it to regulate your nervous system. Allow yourself to be in the stillness. Just as going into nature and being around nature can help with that sort of thing.
Thanks, Kalimba. A follow-up question I have in reference to sleep, and thank goodness this hasn't happened to me. I'm a very good sleeper and I get my 8 hours, but I've seen on movies, on television shows where they show someone who's had a loss and they can't get out of bed. They're literally sleeping all the time. So is there some kind of red flag that you say to yourself, okay, maybe I need to get some help?
Listen, I think no. I think don't judge yourself. Shakespeare talked about this life being but a dream, and that really resonated for me when I was going through the experience, because there's something about grief that makes you feel like you are wandering around in a sort of dream state while the rest of the world is happening out there. And you should be involved in it and should be being active, but that's not the case. The case is that you are where you are, and you need to honor that and be present with that and show yourself that kindness, and ask for help if you need the help. If people are still insisting that you do get up, you have to go into work, etc., ask for help and support in terms of the practical aspects of managing that. But I would say otherwise, don't put any pressure on yourself or limits for when that isn't something you should be doing anymore. You are in your right place at your right time, going through something, and it's a process and a phase, and you will be fine.
Thank you. I appreciate those remarks. And something I'd like to add, we practice elevated listening here at this platform. So all of our co-hosts and team members are elevated listeners. And I think it's really important, just from that perspective of someone who's running this platform, but also for someone who is grieving, that it might not be the best thing to come back to the person and say, oh, it's been long enough, you should have moved on, or when this happened to me, I went and did this, because somebody like me probably just wants someone to listen. And what people want to do is they want to fix us, because they don't know what to say. So therefore they come up with, well, when I lost so-and-so, I did this, and maybe you could do that. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. I think we all have our own right way and time to do things. And part of the beauty of getting really still is that you allow your body to hear its own intuition, its own inner guidance in a much stronger way than we might do when we're living our busy lives. And so also have empathy. Like you say, it is an awkward thing. People don't know how to approach you, especially if they haven't gone through it. They don't know how to fix you. They don't know what to say without it coming across wrong. It's coming from a context of a good place, or wanting to help, or wanting to support. And so I think, receive their wisdom, receive their help in the context that they mean it, their help in the context that they mean it. But also always keep that bit of yourself back to really just be in tune with what you need at that time. And then I think hopefully it gets easier.
Absolutely. And something else I'd like to just put out there, just as a suggestion, would be contact the person who's grieving and say, Kalimba, I know that you lost your family member, and I don't know what to say, but I am here to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, talking out those stories really are medicine, and stories of truth particularly are medicine. And even hearing yourself talk stories of truth, the truth of your experience out, that can be really helpful on your journey through the process.
Absolutely. Some great tips that you're giving here. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit more about this podcast that you're going to be releasing, and the types of guests that you're looking for, and the type of subjects that you'll be discussing, because this topic of energy really resonates with so many people. And it seems like a great opportunity for someone to be able to share their story with you and with your audience.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I mean, I think grief will be something that'll be discussed. I'm also really keen and really excited to be talking about ascension symptoms, as we are moving from this 3D matrix physical world into a more 5D consciousness, and really sort of explaining that to people, and helping people on their spiritual awakening journeys. And also talking a little bit about other experiences that I've had that have helped me with spiritual awakenings, going through things like the dark night of the soul, being on a twin flame journey, which has been incredibly difficult and challenging. So it'll be covering a whole range of spiritually based topics, but essentially really also just discussing how we can timeline shift at any time when we make a choice, and how to do that in order to get into our highest vibrational timeline for our lives.
Wonderful. So when we talk about 3D to 5D, I think a very surface level way to describe that, and then I'd like you to really come in on it and hone in on it, is moving from a world where we're consumed with trends, we're consumed with money, with things, we're coming from a place of ego, to the exact opposite, is where it's more heart-centric. We are concerned about humanity, about each other. That's my understanding. But what would you say it is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to be incarnated, to be alive at this time is a real gift, because we are about to experience a huge jump in consciousness, and it's really exciting. And that jump in consciousness is a move away from really our fear-based understanding of the world. We've been taught about fear, about lack, about separation. And 5D consciousness is really the opposite of that. It's about love. We will see greater polarization. Just to give clarity as well, if you're in that 4D space, that's when you're kind of crossing over. You're beginning to expand yourself and expand your understanding and your consciousness to be within this 5D realm, but you'll still have fears and still have a real grip on the 3D world that you're used to, which is completely understandable. And I'm probably myself more in that space still, or it's a challenge every day. And like we say, energy changes in every moment. We can go between all three. But I think it's a really exciting time for that reason.
I think it's exciting as well. And here on this platform, we're all about education, hope, and inspiration, sharing and caring. And I'm glad that you brought your energy here today, because you really fit in well. What about when we have interactions with people who have different energy that we can feel? We're not judging, but we feel it's different, and we feel that it's not on the same parallel, with not labeling that it's lower or it's negative, but it's not the same, and yet we still have to interface with this person.
I mean, that is one of the most difficult things. There are lower vibrational energy frequencies, and I say that without judgment, that's without shame, like you were saying. But in order to sort of maintain your energy levels at a high vibrational level, you have to learn how to transmute that energy, not react to it, but be creative with it. If people are sending out bad energy and they're around you, rather than responding or reacting to it, it's about being creative about the love that you send back in return, and that energy that you maintain in, because that's hygienic for you. That's the best energy hygiene that you can practice. But I'll go into that a little more on my Timeline Travelers podcast when it is launched.
And I went to your Instagram for the Timeline Travelers, and what I noticed, what really stood out for me, was spiritual awakening. What is a spiritual awakening, and how does one know when they've had it?
Well, for me, Jacalyn, it came in various sort of stages, and I feel like over my life I've been drip fed different types of spiritual awakenings. They're really shocking at first. They're quite challenging, and they're difficult. They can be really lonely, particularly if you are moving along different timelines onto a higher vibrational timeline. It might be quite lonely because you're finding that friends, and I think 2023 has been a big year for people realizing that friendships have changed. Friendships that they've had for years and years and years suddenly aren't around or in resonating for them in the same way. And that's a lot to do with this shift that's taking place in the energetic field of the earth. It's sorry, getting a frog in my throat there, but with my excitement. But yeah, I think spiritual awakenings come to you in a range of different ways, and they'll be different for every person. Be really open to them. really what it's describing is just coming into realization that this physical plane that we've been living, or that we're accustomed to, that there is depth to it beyond what the five senses might perceive. And it's really about sort of opening our central selves up to a wider frame of existence. And like I say, on my podcast at Timeline Travelers, I'll be discussing things like Dark Night of the Soul. I'll be discussing different types of spiritual awakenings in more detail. And I'll be talking about things like twin flame journey, which can also lead to a spiritual awakening. So it would be great to come on the show again, in fact, and just hear a bit more about other people's experiences and maybe talk to a few other people.
Absolutely, we'll do that. We still have some time today. So would you be
Great.
able to go into what the twin flame journey, what does that mean for those who don't know?
A twin flame journey is a particular type of soul connection, and a lot of the type of soul connections that we might realize in our lifetimes will help us on our spiritual journey. Some karmically and quite diffically, some very supportively. And when it's the twin flame journey, that's something that is essentially a realization of meeting your energetic compatriot on earth, someone who resonates exactly the same frequency as you, at the higher soul level. But that's not to say, incidentally, that their 3D manifested physical selves will necessarily be on that same level. And so that's why they call it a journey, and that's why it's tough. Because while you might be able to sense into higher timeline versions or the higher soul of someone, and particularly if you are an empath, it's difficult if the 3D actual reality of them manifested is different. It's a difficult, but like I said, we'll talk about that in a lot more detail when we have a lot more time.
Fantastic. Another topic that I'd love to discuss with you when we have more time as well, but maybe we could just tap into it, is if someone is a person who follows their intuition, how is intuition the same or different from having skills of being an empath?
I think your intuition is really that voice. It's the flow of the universe that you can lean into, and it's that inner voice from this sort of high universal energy that speaks to you. I think it was Edgar Allan Poe who said that we should make the world safer for intuition and curiosity, because then it'll become a much more beautiful, safer space for us. We should really protect those things. And I feel like it's something we're really kind of tutored out of. We're taught to not really listen to, and particularly when it comes to women over the years, it's sort of something that's intuition or a woman's hunch is kind of been labeled as, curiosity or snooping or madness even at stages. So it's great that we're moving away from that sort of type of thinking. And it's great that intuition is being more understood, not just in our personal lives, but being used in the workplace as well. And I don't think that it's something that's mutually exclusive to being an empath or necessarily different. I just think that if you're an empath, you probably can intuitively tune into people's energies. You're probably quite good at absorbing other people's energies and would have to learn how to protect yourself a bit, therefore. But if you're an empath, then it's probably one of your toolkit that you use quite regularly, sometimes without even realizing, quite unconsciously.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Another question that I have for you is, so the name of your podcast, Timeline Travelers. So when people's energy change, they're here in this form, in this container, and then they leave, and then they come back in another possibly. Does that always mean, or is it mutually exclusive, that potentially in this container they were 3D, and then when they come back they're 5D? Or they were 5D and they come back as 3D?
So timeline travelers, and why I call it that is, it's not that necessarily your timeline shifting off this planet and coming back in a different body or a different form, although yes, that can and does happen as well. Timeline travelers is really just about talking about moving along different timelines within your life, which you can do second per second, minute per minute, or almost like a camera shuttering. It's not something that we have to physically remove or move off this planet in order to do it. It's about really learning how to tune into energies, go with the flow, surrender, accept accept the intuition that you're receiving, and make shifts if that's what feels right to you. And I think the beauty about something like that is that generationally, that can really help pathologies. We're so taught in this life that we should be meeting various timeline milestones at certain points. If people don't reach them, they might commit suicide, or either they're getting into marriage that they shouldn't be getting into, or other agreements that are lower vibrational and keep them stuck. And so really the discussion is around not feeling that pressure anymore, not needing to do those things, opening up to a different way of being, which is non-traditional in that respect, if that feels right to you.
Absolutely. Great points. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many different areas that we could discuss. So how I want to kind of just wrap it up for energy. To some people, energy means keeping the lights on. Yeah. It's the television, it's the computer, and energy has such a much broader meaning. How would you describe, if you were in an elevator with someone and they asked you, what do you do? How would you explain what energy is and energy workers are?
Oh, great. That's a great question. I think that energy is really the fabric of life. Energy is everything is made up of energy. And the more you lean into a spiritual journey, the more you realize all this stuff that feels really hard is not. It's lots of energetic atoms, and it's quite flimsy, and you're able to move through it, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a real light, energetic thing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here today, and I'm glad that you're going to be coming back to meet with us again. What would you like to say to our audience, for anyone out there who is going through a grieving process? Maybe they're just lost. Maybe they're afraid. Maybe they're overwhelmed and they feel like they're the only ones in the whole world.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd like to give them almost a meditation, Dr. Jacalyn, and thank you for having me on the show as well. And I'd be very happy to come back. But if I could say anything to them, I would say, get really still, close your eyes, breathe, and imagine a pink light around you, and imagine someone loving and caring for you and being incredibly supportive of you in front of you, holding that grief and that pain in front of you. And just meditate on that. Just sit with yourself and imagine that around you, and that person in front of you supporting you, being there with you, because that is existing on a timeline, whether you see it or not, and that will help you get through.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And for people who are interested in being a guest or being featured on your podcast, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
I'd love that. Please do. I mean, I've actually got a really exciting author coming up, Jennifer Heek, who wrote The Other Side, which is about women artists in the spirit world. But if anyone would like to message me at the Instagram account, which is, I think, on the screen at the bottom there, at timeline_travelers. Otherwise, they can reach me via my website, info@KalimbaCulverwell.com.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been an
Thank you
absolute
so much,
pleasure.
Dr. Jacalyn.
Thank you. We want to say hello to Rebecca also. Thank you so much for the
Yes,
introduction.
that's true. Thank you, Rebecca, for introducing us.
Thank you so much. So we look forward to having you back with us very soon. And
It would be
until
my
then,
pleasure and an
it's
honor.
keep up the great work, everything that you're doing.
Thank you, you too. Thank you, Dr. Jacalyn.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Thank you, everyone. Please do go over to Kalimba's Instagram. I'm putting it up again. Here it is. It's timeline_travelers. I've gone and I'm following her now as well. We invite you to stay tuned to our next show, which is our Sales Leader Roundtable, which is hosted by Kendley and Jim. They've got a very special guest who's an expert when it comes to social media marketing on LinkedIn. And if you missed any of our other shows today, please go over to our YouTube channel, which is USA Global TV and Radio. And before we leave, I just want to give a selfish plug to one of my new books. This is my calling card, Mastering the Power of Elevated Listening, Solutions for Deeper Connections, Better Relationships, and More Authentic Conversations. In here are 2 quizzes. The first is an assessment because everyone tells me that they're such a great listener. Really? Take the test. Let's see if you are. Why is it important? Because when we're listening at an elevated level, we're listening without judgment. We're listening without interruption. We're listening without providing a solution. And we're listening without stealing the stage. Also included here are testimonials and actual case studies that will help you, again, find solutions. It's not about judging anyone or anything. It's how can we find inner peace so that we can be part of world peace. Thank you for listening to me. You can find me on Fridays for my talking head segments where I give you more information, pointers, video role plays about how to listen at an elevated level. Thanks again. We'll be back shortly in a few minutes for our next show. Bye.